So welcome to Happy Hungry Hippie. Yes, what we're bringing you this week is something quite exclusive. We've just been to the Cotwold in Easter 2025 with my wife and her family and had an absolutely wonderful time visiting the Deer Park Vineyard. So we've actually come back to the same village, Eckington, to stay in a lovely Airbnb, and we are now going to visit the Deer Park Vineyard Festival on our wedding anniversary. We've left our little Harvey Doxy Poo at home and are now on a little adventure where we visited Cheltenham, which is an absolutely fantastic, which is basically on the western skirt of the Cotswold. It's quite a big area of natural beauty, and we're now just come half an hour north, so in the northwest part of the Cotswold. Yeah, so we've just taken a lovely walk. It's probably about 1.5-2 miles from Eckington to the Deer Park Vineyard. Yes, we've left our car at the Airbnb, which is a lovely little quaint Airbnb with Lynn and Lionel. It's actually right next to The Bell, which is a really good restaurant. So if you are staying at Eckington, I do recommend, they've got a couple of pubs. The Anchor, which is just a nice little place you can just pop in for a drink, but The Bell is absolutely amazing, so do check that out. So as part of our visit, we bought these tickets in advance, which were, I think, were £35 each. There's also some tasting sessions that you can do. There's a full agenda. I'm going to put the sort of agenda down to what we're going to do. Obviously we won't be able to film all of it. We're kind of trying to do the most of what we can, and if you just look around, it's absolutely stunning. It could not be a more nicer day. It's really hot. The end of June. The sky is absolutely wonderful, so I don't think there's going to be any rain today at all. So as part of this itinerary, I'll put the link below just to show you the agenda, and there's an itinerary of looking at the history of the vineyard, which does actually mainly do white wine, but it does actually do a Pinot Noir as well. I did actually post a video of Jeremy Clarkson's little diddly squat shop, so do check the link out. We were wanting to visit his new pub, which is not far from his shop. It's the Farmer's Dog. You do have to book in advance if you are going to stay or go for a meal there, but you can certainly pop in for a drink. We've missed this out on this trip because basically it's about 50 minutes from here. You have to really drive to the east side of the Cotswold, more towards Oxford. So you can see now where we're walking now is basically onto this hillside here, which is basically where the Deer Park Vineyard is here. And the Cotswold is a really lovely county. It's just like really lovely sort of rolling hills, which is situated between the Midlands and London, and also Wales as well. So from where we are, you're pretty much within an hour of quite a lot of places to visit, in terms of not just the Cotswold itself, but also you've got Oxford, you've got Bath, Cheltenham, which is where we stayed last night, which is an absolutely lovely spa town, really nice. So just from Eckington, you've got this turning here, this junction, which you can see here. It's quite a busy road, but you've got a turning here which says Deer Park Business Centre. So pretty much you take a left at this crossroad. This is from Eckington this way, and then you pretty much come to this turning here, which is towards the Combertons, as you can see on the signpost there. So you take a left down here. So there's been a bit of a winey connoisseur myself, and we're actually on a tasting session today at about 3:30, which is for the sparkling wine. We couldn't get onto the cheese one because they'd sold out, but we'll have to save that for next time. So we're super excited. When we were actually here last time at Easter time, Hugo was our guide, who kindly sort of gave us a bit of a tour and an insight, and sampled some of the amazing ones. One thing we didn't try is the red, which is the Pinot Noir, but the whites were absolutely tremendous, and they've won some really fantastic awards. So yeah, we're looking forward to sharing some of these with you. Please do subscribe, and also turn on those notifications. Bing! I sort of release videos mainly on sort of food. I do also have a cocktail channel which is Hibs Happy Hour, so do check that out as well. But my main channel is obviously Happy Hungry Hippie, where I mainly do cover food and cookbook reviews. So the weather is absolutely gorgeous. Now walking just by a lovely country lane, and it's really quite exciting, but we're almost going into the unknown as well, because I've never been to anything like this before. You can see a plane just above us there. Wow. And there's Jenna's walking up ahead there. And I'm just going to sort of show you now just a bit of the countryside. There's a lovely walk here which you can do. There's like a little tower at the top on the other side of the vineyard, as you can see that way there. She just stumbled across a nice little pathway, so you can go over this stile here, and if you just look, you can just see the tower just at the top there, and the vineyard is just skirts just below this tower, and there's a lovely walk which you can do, a circular walk a bit from behind there, which is, there's actually deer on this vineyard which they release just to naturally forage on and graze on the land. So nearly there. Looking forward to seeing our friend Hugo from last time, and actually meet the owners as well, of course. I'll also put in a bit of the history and detail of this vineyard, but it's won some tremendous awards. I think they've won gold, silver and bronze for various different ones, but I think they do about a range of about 8 to 10 different varieties. You do one Pinot Noir, which is to do one red. Pinot Noir is quite a difficult grape to grow. It's quite a light wine, but very hit and miss. We've tried the majority of the wines and we've not had one bad wine. So we're just now meandering down this country lane, and we're just coming to a little bank, a little dip at the bottom here. And then you can almost see where the tower is at the top. There. See here now, we're just nearly arriving here. It's actually a lodge, the Vineyard Lodge, which you can stay. Just looks, this will no doubt be full. Look at this, just across these fields. Look at that, lovely. Yes. So there's the Vineyard Lodge. Don't want to infringe on anyone's privacy. There it is as well, on the other side. Absolutely lovely, stunning. There's my wife just waiting for me. And there's more accommodation. I don't know if this is part of the lodge, but it's a cottage. Just about see some activity in the distance, and here we are. You can see the vineyard itself. Look at this, absolutely stunning. So this is what we are part of. Yes, it's back, it's better. The Bredon Wine Fair, 28th of June 2025. Free wine tasting, live music, great food. Look at that. Absolutely stunning. And it's absolutely stifling, but here we are, Deer Park, and there is my beautiful wife. Fayre. And now we're just going to work our way to the top. Really lovely people, just showing us the way and meander to the top. Thankfully it's just a nice little breeze, but wow, look at this, absolutely incredible. So no sign of the day at the moment, but there's the lake. How good is this? What? Oh yeah, there's a deer at the top. Just see them running around the side.
You could be tasty. was cold and it's off me now because he's quite happy with the setup. It's already worth what you paid. So that's a good start. If I introduce myself, and then I'll... No, you introduce yourself.
That's okay. Oh, thanks. So some of you may have seen me already at the tasting, not tasting, masterclass of Balsam wine. So I'm Hetty and I work for a company called Notcher & Co. So we're a wholesaler distributor for wines from all over the world and we sell wine all over the country. So I work on the London sales team. I'm specifically based in the sort of West London market, so quite a nice place to be really. But I first came to so putting together wine lists for hotels and restaurants, so food and wine pairings and putting listings together is sort of what I do now for my day job.
Yeah, it's far more glamorous than me. I'm just a winemaker. So you get the two sides of it. So you'll get the more commercial side and sort of maybe observations about the trade in a more sort of local sense from Hetty. For me, I'm the winemaker of Three Pines. So I make a few of these wines that we're going to try today, a couple of them. So I know a little bit more maybe about how they've been made and why they're tasting like they do. And then we can have a discussion about what we think of it. Please, this is meant to be fairly informal, so if you have any questions, please just shout them out and we'll go down the routes that you'd like to go down.
What's your name?
Oh God, that's a good point.
Everyone.
Yeah, that's way beyond me. I get called all sorts of things, but my name's Martin Fayre, so Martin is my name. And I've been working at Three Pines for nearly 40 years. My father-in-law planted the first vines there in 1973. So I've seen the industry grow and change enormously over the years and gone from being really, really difficult to sell English wine to now finding us struggling to produce enough to satisfy the market. So huge change in who's drinking and where it's being sold. So it really is quite a success story for the English wine scene. With a few, I've got a few slight nervous sort of bits in there as well, because we are growing very quickly and we've got to make sure that it doesn't get overdone because we don't see the production side of it increase much faster than the sales side does. So that's the big challenge for the industry. We can talk about that maybe a bit more at the end. So without delay, the first wine we've poured for you is from Amerley, which is Worcestershire, and it is a 20 and it is 100% Phoenix as a variety. So Phoenix is one of the new varieties that was produced developed in Germany in the 70s and 80s. Quite a few vineyards planted it, and it's become quite a good variety because it's quite disease resistant. It's got a little bit more character than Seymour Blanc, which was the first sort of hybrid variety that the UK started growing. Grown a lot on this side of the country, and they've made this into a sparkling wine. I think when they originally grew the grapes, they were aiming for a still wine, but the way that the vintage turned out, the way the grapes turned out, the winemakers who are, this is made at Hackney Green, up near Bobbington in Staffordshire. They looked at the analysis of the grapes and suggested to them that they might consider sparkling. So I would think that maybe the acidity was a little bit higher than they had really wanted. So they had a good base for sparkling wines, and that's how they've done it. It's been on its leaves for not very long, so I don't know how much you guys will know about the method of sparkling wine, the traditional method that's used in the UK. Everybody, bear with me if I just give you a very quick resume. So the grapes are picked, they come up to the winery, and they will generally be what's called whole bunch pressed. So that's where the whole bunches will be put into the press and very, very gently squeezed. We won't churn them, we won't turn them around. We're trying to get really, really clean juice out of the press because that makes the best sparkling. Because when we traditionally describe sparkling wine, we talk about things like brioche, with baking terms, brioche, yeasty, biscuity, all these things. And that's because we're getting the character coming from the lees up through the wine. So we put it into bottle with some more yeast, and it goes through a second fermentation, and it just sits on its side with all of the yeast in the side of the bottle, and it just stays there for however long. So when we say it's been on its lees for just over a year, that has been in this position. So the yeast is reacting with the wine and giving it that autolytic character. So a year isn't very long. So this is quite a clean, fresh, still a little fruit in it, and not a huge amount of that classic champagne style, but it's still a really pleasant, fresh, especially on a day like this, sparkling wine. So enjoy it. You don't have to wait for me to try it. Drink at your own pace. Don't go on coming along.
Started.
So they stay on their side like that. At the end of the process, you've got all the yeast in the bottom of the bottle. So you then have to turn it and twist it. It's called wriggling.
Throughout the year.
No, it sits on its leaves like that. Nowadays, it used to be a little Frenchman with a berry on. We used to go around and twist them a 16th of a turn every day and gradually tilt the bottles up. Nowadays, it's machines that do it. The machine is called a riddler, a gyro pallet, and it takes the bottle from horizontal to vertical in 64 moves. And all of the yeast has been into the neck of the bottle. So then, you freeze the seconds, which puts ice. It traps the yeast in the ice, and then we can turn the bottle the right way up. The ice cap stays in the neck of the bottle. We flick the crown cap off, because it hasn't got a cork in it at this stage, it's got a beer cap on it. Flick that off, and there's 6 bar of pressure in the wine. Blows the ice cap out.
Do you want me to move my hand? There we go.
And the wine muzzle on. And that's sparkling wine by the traditional method. It's the same method they use in Champagne, the same in Cava, but not the same as Prosecco.
Thank you.
After 1 year, that process is taking the
So Prosecco is done with a second fermentation, in exactly the same way, but the fermentation is done in the tank. So it goes through the second fermentation, and then quite quickly after it's finished, it gets transferred under pressure into the bottle, and the cork goes in. So it misses out that bit with all of the yeast in the bottle. So Prosecco is far more fruit-driven, far more simple. It's a still wine with a few bubbles in it.
But they have to use pressurized tank.
They have to use a pressurized tank, which is it's actually called the Charmat method. Quicker turnaround, yeah. So they're producing grapes. They'll be picking the harvest just about now, I expect, and the wines will be out on the market by Christmas. So yeah, a lot of Proseccos are very young. Yeah, could be. Yeah. There are some very good Proseccos about, and there's some very good traditional method sparkling ones. But that's what you got to look for on the label. You got to look for traditional method if you want to find something with a little bit more complexity to it. Sorry, I've been talking.
That's okay. I was going to say, if you like Italian, I mean, we're sort of celebrating English sparkling today, which is absolutely knocking it out of the park. We're very lucky in my role that I get to work with so many amazing English sparkling wine producers, and regularly there's so many fun events that they're always doing. But I think Italy is one of those places that, for the most part, consider. Cheers. I think Italy, for the most part, people think of it as being kind of Prosecco. That's the main sparkling wine people think of, but Franciacorta is fantastic from there. They have the sparkling wines from Treviso. So these are, I think I had a Ferrari before, they're kind of the big producer down there. They do, so I mean, even within Prosecco, if you look for Vineyards or any of the DOCG Prosecco producers, so we'll see on the DOCG, but no, going back to this, I mean, I love asking people's opinion on what you taste. This is a variety that I've got to be honest, until today, I hadn't tasted either, and I get to try a lot of wine. So it's just really interesting. I'm very keen to know any tasting notes that you guys might pick.
It's actually a cross between, this, we're still talking about the first one, by the way. This is Phoenix is a cross between Bacchus and Fayre. So it has a little bit of nettly hedgerow character to it, as well as good acidity. So it's quite a good variety to go either way. It's still all sparkling.
What was the second grape?
Bacchus and Fayre Blanc. So Fayre Blanc was a variety that was grown in a lot of vineyards that planted very early. We have a lot of Fayre Blanc to start with. It grows very, very cleanly. It's frost resistant. It's disease resistant, and you almost get a guaranteed yield out of it. The downside of it was that it's a little bit one-dimensional. It doesn't give huge sugar levels, and it doesn't have a huge amount of character. It's a real asset for sparkling wine. From what I've said about picking up the lees character, you haven't got too much fruit character that you're competing with. So it does make really, really good sparkling. And the second wine that I'll talk about in a minute has got Fayre Blanc in it as a component.
Do they ripen at the same time?
Fayre Blanc ripens a little bit later than Phoenix. Phoenix tends to come slightly earlier, but they're both reasonably late ripening. What do you think of the first one? Clean and fresh? Yeah.
Okay, apple.
Was it like a really crisp green apple?
Yeah, no, I agree totally. And quite often with these sort of varieties, Phoenix and Fayre Blanc, Orion, these are varieties that quite often are not
Very studious, yes.
So they tend to have
It's got very short memory.
a grape that has two acids. There are two acids in wine primarily. There's tartaric acid and there's malic acid. Malic acid is the apple acid, if you like, when you get out. So if you're picking a grape that's not fully ripe, then you're going to get a higher level of malic acid in the grape, which is what gives you that slightly appley character when they're young. If you age it in bottle for a little bit, it sort of mellows and softens and that disappears. But yeah, certainly apples and orchard fruits are a common descriptor in, say, the young Fayre Blanc sparkling wine.
You touched on quite an interesting point as well, actually, that for the most part, when you're growing grapes for sparkling wine, particularly the sparkling wine that is going to go to two fermentations, it's really tricky to get the balance of having ripe fruit without being overripe or have too much sugar. Because the second you have too much sugar, you're going to have a higher alcohol level. Because we're trying to keep the alcohol levels generally between, well, in English sparkling wine about 11 to 11.5%, but generally speaking, you'll see champagne's around 12.5%. You don't want it too alcoholic. So the more sugar that gets accumulated in those grapes, you're going to have a more alcoholic end product, specifically when you're adding additional sugars for the second fermentation. So you don't want to have a particularly alcoholic base wine before you're then adding more sugar to create the second fermentation, because by the time you do that, the yeast is not going to be able to survive if the alcohol levels are too high. So you're not going to achieve the bubbles through second fermentation. So
it's a really good point actually, because the change that we've seen in grape growing, it's something that never occurred to us when we were making wines 20 years ago. The idea that we might have too much sugar to make a sparkling wine. And now we do have to go out and pick on sugar levels as much as we do on acidities. So climate change, whether you like it or not, is here, and it is having an effect on things. And they're not always good things. Everybody thinks English wine must be absolutely cooking it now because it's so good for us. But we've incurred a lot more problems. We get much lower yields, not much lower, we get lower yields than we used to, which has probably helped our quality. We do get riper grapes, but we get more problems in the vineyard. We used to just have to worry about mildews and botrytis and fungal diseases. Now we're starting to see more insects and more problems in the vineyard, so looking after the vineyards is becoming far more complicated. And running alongside that, we have the need to be sustainable and trying to do everything we can to be producing our grapes sustainably. So a lot of work going into natural remedies for all of these problems that we're getting on the other side. So it's quite an interesting time for the industry. But those that get it right are doing a really, really good job. So the second wine, I better tell you about that. I know a bit about this one. This is our classic cuvee, non-vintage. We started making this in 1988. We've made it every year since. And it's very much an entry-level, meant as an entry-level sparkling wine. It's got Sauvignon Blanc, a little bit of Phoenix, and a little bit of Pinot Noir. So we're just starting to touch on the classic grape, if you like, for the champagne. Yeah, we will tend to ferment them separately, and then when we finish the first fermentation, we'll add little bits and decide what we think works best for the blend before it goes in the bottle. And then we'll bottle it up. And it's non-vintage as well, so we always keep back a little bit of the previous blend to put in, so that we can create a little bit more consistency and give it a bit more instant age, so we don't have to leave it on the lees for quite so long. So the first one was on its lees for about a year. This has been on its lees for about 18 to 20 months, somewhere around there. So we're starting to see a little bit more lees character, but it's still quite fruit driven. It's still not chasing that sort of champagne style. It's got a little bit more residual sugar in it as well. So when we take the crown cap off, we can adjust the sweetness by putting in what's called a dosage, which can be a blend of wine, sweeter wine, even brandy spirit is used quite a lot in champagne, but not so much in the UK. So this is meant to be an entry level. This is probably one of the less expensive English sparkling wines that are around. We make it bigger volume, which allows us to do that. And the yields that we get, we're not restricting the yields too much for these varieties. So this we actually sell at just under £20, which for an English sparkling wine is probably too low, but that's where we are at the moment. And it'll be interesting to get Hetty's view on things, because I see a very, very, very big difference in the market for sparkling wines on the west of the country compared to what's happening in the southeast of London. Sparkling wine is now an everyday drink. If you go into London, they're all having a glass of champagne on a Friday evening. Here we might have a bottle of Prosecco if we're going out to the pub, but actually getting people to pay more than 20 quid for a bottle of sparkling wine it becomes a special occasion. And so for us to keep moving volumes if we want to, we feel like we're stuck at that sort of level.
The thing is that a pub you buy a glass.
Yes.
So I guess it's about, I don't know,
yeah, the problem with the pub sector is that they have a requirement to make a fair bit of margin in order to cover their costs. And they traditionally, I think, pub wines generally have had a fairly poor reception, and they will serve you the cheapest unless you ask for something better. So that's another challenge to get over, I think. But
when you describe a bottle, it's like 80 to 10 months.
Yeah.
You just chase some champagne. Why is it chasing? How is it chasing the champagne?
Well, we're not chasing to be like champagne. It's just champagne will sit on its lees. Generally, not all champagnes, there are differences, but if you want to get the more autolytic character from the east, they've got to sit on their lees for a bit longer. I'd take it on my knowledge of champagne is limited, but take Henley-In-Arden, who are a very, very English vineyard that has been built up very much from champagne knowledge, if you like. you go out and buy a bottle of Night Timber on the shelf, so you'll pay a lot of money for it, but you'll be getting a 2013, 2014 vintage. You know, they've been lees aged for a long, long time, and you would expect to be getting a lot of that yeasty character.
The yeast just has longer.
Yeah, it's in contact with the wine much longer. So I would argue that in general, these two wines that we've tried here, because of the varieties we're using, they're not necessarily best suited to much longer aging. That's why the varieties and the length of time on the lees works. If you tried this wine in 5 years' time, it probably wouldn't have worked as well as a traditional Pinot Chardonnay. Yeah, the traditional grapes are a little bit more robust for that longer aging, I think. So I was talking about the I was actually talking about the difference in the wine market probably in the southeast of the country compared to the west, and price points and what people will spend on a bottle of wine. I feel like in this side of the country we have a lower barrier compared to the southeast.
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of interesting because when I worked in retail before, I mean, some of our best selling, I mean, you've probably all heard of Three Choirs is quite a big one, Night Timber, obviously, as we've discussed. At the moment, one of the wineries that we work with through my company is Hattingly, so it's just so interesting. Everybody has a different way of doing things. Hattingly is not quite so Sussex-based. A lot of them are sort of Kent, Sussex, that side of the world, whereas they kind of, some of them go into Suffolk a little bit, some of them are a little bit more towards Devon, but they're really, you know, there's vineyard sites, and, you know, you probably know a lot more than I do. A lot of wineries, big names, will actually have sites from really quite, you know, different counties, you know, miles and miles away from where the actual wineries. And they're either buying grapes or they own those plots and they have people going out from there and they'll pick them at different times and they will add different components to the wine. So I don't know how common that is around this area. I know that lots of the southern wineries have got lots all the way from Devon to Suffolk and over.
It's starting to happen more. I think that we've been slower to plant Chardonnay and Pinot Noir on this side of the country, so we're playing catch up a little bit. But there's a realisation that English wine is going to be known for its sparkling. 75% of the plantings that have been put in now, 75% of the production is for sparkling wine in the country. In 2023, we produced 22 million bottles of wine. And if 75% of that is sparkling, that's becoming quite a serious competitor to champagne.
Is that for exports as well?
Yeah. So there's a big push on exports to America and Asia.
Oh.
They were considered to be two target areas for English sparkling wine. Some companies have had some success with it, and it's got to be the way that we go if we're going to be able to sell that number of bottles.
We're not taking sign for the Arabs yet.
Not yet. Well, I'm sure somebody is. Yeah. So before we move on to the third wine, are there any comments on the second one? You can be rude. I'm fairly thick-skinned.
I didn't like that one as much as the first.
You like the first one?
Yeah,
Okay.
So
So we made it. It's a little bit sweeter, I think, as well. And I think we find that, as a general rule, people like to be seen to be drinking dry wines, but actually, a huge number of wines that we drink have got a surprising amount of sugar in them. They are still dry wines, but they're not bone dry. And I think as an industry, we like to make wine dry because that's the thing to do. But actually, when you look at things commercially, there's a little bit of sugar in a wine helps to bring out fruit character. So maybe that you've got a particularly dry palate and that suits your style. It's absolutely fine. So yeah.
I found that it smelled quite phenology, but didn't taste it. So I had that sort of an undertone of that.
The autolysis, a little bit more autolytic, a little bit more time on the lees. So yeast autolysis is basically the process of, so everyone kind of gets the gist of how fermentation works. You have sugar, you have yeast eats all the sugar, yum, until the sugar's gone, it dies, and it basically sinks to the bottom. Think of it as a physical thing, like bread yeast. It dies, it goes to the bottom of the barrel or the tank or wherever it is, and regardless of where that wine sits with it, obviously in a bottle, you're in a much more concentrated space with that bottle. So when you go through your first fermentation, and then the wine's blended, and then more yeast and more sugar and a little bit of grape must is then put into the bottle to start the second fermentation. So when that yeast dies, it basically takes a little bit of time, but from about 6 months onwards, those yeast cells are going to start breaking down. So that's the process of yeast autolysis. It's basically just the breaking down of those yeast cells. And as they do that, it's going to release those kind of breads, brioche, pastry, biscuit, dough kind of aromas.
So you're adding your own yeast, you're not using natural yeast.
Yeah. There are a few vineyards that do wild yeast. It's not common for second fermentations to have a wild yeast because you just have no idea when it would stop. You need something that's more robust to cope with alcohol that's already there. So yeah,
You talk to cider makers in the area, you start fighting a pub on that alone.
Yeah.
So there's those that use the wild yeast and those that,
yeah.
I'm sure you know.
Yeah. There's an argument that says that even if we try to make a wine that with a wild yeast and not add yeast, because we've used yeasts, then that yeast is likely to hop from tank to tank, and so there's no such thing as a wild yeast in our fermentations.
Yeah.
Another argument that goes contrary to that is that all fermentations actually start off with wild yeasts, and it's only at the end of the fermentations that the yeast that you added start to kill them off and cope with the alcohol.
I've heard the opinion that most of the taste in alcoholic beverage that is fermented is usually yeast, not the product.
Yeah.
It's spicy.
Yeah. Every winemaker has their own favourite yeast. There's two types. I'm not going to get too technical now, but there's two types of yeast used in winemaking. There's what's called a champagne yeast, obviously used for this sort of thing because it is more robust, and that's a Baianus yeast. And then the more fruity yeasts for more aromatic styles is called a Ceremitii yeast. So those are the two basic strains. And then there's all sorts of different sort of changes within that.
You just have to look at it every year, right? And go, what kind of yeast do I add? How much do I add?
Well, the fruit gives you good quality. You can't make great stuff without good fruit. But then you can manipulate how that fruit tastes by using different yeasts. And because Three Choirs is a bigger vineyard, we might bring in a Phoenix, and we might have enough juice to put it in 3 or 4 different tanks. And I will use different yeasts in those different tanks, and that creates complexity. So, and then you can pick the best ones in order to go into whichever wine you want to make. So different yeasts will affect the wine differently. They'll have different. Right. Do finish.
I can take it.
Different yeasts have very different characteristics, and therefore using that to create complexity.
When they talk about a blended, is it just the grape or is it grape and yeast? When they talk about a blended variety?
Oh, blending is something, unfortunately, became a little bit frowned upon because when the Australians came over, they started marketing single variety wines, and we got obsessed with Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, Cabernet Sauvignon, and Merlot, and then nobody else knew any other grape variety for quite a long time. And the art of blending, winemaking has become very much a science in many ways, the yeasts and the analysis that we do and everything, but there's still the art of the blending, which we do with a bit of help from analysis, but we do it with our palate. And so, even a single variety wine, if you had 100% Bacchus, for example, if you have 100% Bacchus from Three Choirs, that's made up of 4 or 5 different tanks, from different batches of Bacchus grown in different parts of the vineyard. So we're still blending it. It's still a blend, but on the label, it's a single variety, and you immediately think there's no blending.
But then it's the fact that you use different yeasts in some of those won't be notified, it won't be significant in calling it blended. It's only the grape.
It will be significant, the different
No,
tastes.
I know,
different
the taste
tastes.
is
Yeah.
class is blended, it's only the grape.
Yeah, on the label,
Yeah.
it's still all of that
It
grape.
would be a single variety that actually
From 4 to 5 different yeasts. And a single variety only has to have 85% of that wine in it. So if you buy a Bacchus, then it only has to have 85% Bacchus. It can have 15% of something else.
I don't know if this is a silly question. Do you have to make your own yeast?
No.
You don't have to make your
No, we tend to use yeast that comes to us ready packed, vacuum packed, and we just have to rehydrate it and add it back in. Yeah. Beer makers make their own yeast and use their own yeast. I am talking too much. Sorry. So sorry, we haven't talked about the third one yet. So this is some of the more observant of you might notice this is a different colour. This is a rosé from Deer Park. It's a blend of I think it's more than 50% Pinot Noir and Seymour Blanc. So now we're starting to merge the old traditional champagne style with the new style from is it 22? 21. This would have been on its stage for a couple of years, so we're going up again. It's had a little bit more yeast character, and it's got the Pinot Noir, which is a little bit more traditional and better at taking on these alternative characters.
So what's the percentage Pinot Noir?
I'm not
But it's
100% sure, I think it's over 50. I think
it's predominantly Pinot Noir.
it's between 50 and 60% Pinot, and then Seymour Blanc after that.
Thank you.
Deer Park's Rosé 2020. Well, this is definitely 21.
This is a really nice one. Are you selling
Yeah, no, rather than, don't go to Deer Park and ask for that. We'll go to the 3 wine stand. Yes.
We don't want to upset the host.
Save out.
Well, 2021 is better than 2022, isn't it?
What I find is amusing
Thank you. Stick it for 2022.
Yes, of course.
in champagne, a blended variety is normal. And that's what makes it champagne. When we went to a house that had a single variety, it's very weird. And yet, when you go you have blended wine, normally it's considered a bit down one. It's really odd. It's double standard.
I think the thing about blending is it increases volume, and therefore you've got more of it.
You really don't want to see that. It don't really make sense.
Jenna's not written anything actually. She's just here just for the tasting.
Pick the one I like and go, I'll buy some of that. To ask some questions.
Most champagne, very few champagnes will be in 100%.
No.
I mean, you get Blanc de Noirs and you get 100%. But wines we're going to try is the last one you just did. It's a classic example of that. This is a blend. This is a blend of the 3 classic champagne varieties.
But it's I mean, I suppose what I'm saying is that the French applaud champagne.
I think so, yeah.
And yet, we consider that really nice.
Before,
Yeah, strawberry, yeah.
before the wine revolution, if you like, in the UK, I mean, it's not, the industries aren't a million miles away from each other.
Just wondered if it's like they never talk to each other.
They're very different markets, though.
Yeah.
I think that's the.
Yeah.
But there are quite a lot of cider producers that are trying to make the wine-style product in order to be able to sell it at a higher price, because otherwise you're competing with batches and stone press. And the craft cider industry has sort of grown, but then I think it's sort of leveled off a bit. So.
Do you have a point in the year where you look at the grapes and you say it's got enough sweetness or it's got the yeast? What
Well,
do you
when we
test
go out,
that?
when we pick up, we know that our grapes will ripen somewhere between September and the end of October. We go out and we test. We've grown 14 different varieties in 3 quarts, so it's quite a long harvest. So we test for sugar levels and we test for acid, and it's about getting that balance right, and whether the grapes are clean, whether you've got a nice ripe skin, and whether the weather's good, which quite often is the determining factor. Last year it was.
So what's good for you?
Sun.
Quite wet.
Last year was.
So it's obviously been very dry this year.
No, last year was our worst harvest I can remember.
What's this year looking like?
Very good. The flowering is finished. The flowering we would normally expect to happen in the second week of Wimbledon. So we're 2 weeks ahead of where we.
It's really late.
So we are early this year for flowering, and we that gives us. What we forget is that we have really, really long days at this time of year in this country.
Yeah.
So every day that we gain now is worth so much more than later in the season.
Maybe
So,
we'll be harvesting earlier then.
yeah, so we'll probably be harvesting earlier. We'll probably be looking at sugar levels and actually looking more at acids and having to go out and pick once the acid is dropped.
How time does that you see plants?
It varies with different varieties. Some varieties you've got to get out there straight away. Other varieties you've got to get in the next few days.
But it's still quite good.
And in terms of the land that you use, have you had to add a lot, or is it just all the right
Sorry, when?
The land that you use.
Last year?
No, to plant your gardens. Do you work out whether it's the right acidity or the right drainage?
Yeah, there's an awful lot that goes into making sure you've got the right water. A lot of people plant in areas that aren't ideal. So, that's a slight problem sometimes.
So you have to do a lot of work on it before you plant.
Well, you can't really change the soil, you just got to choose the right places to plant and plant the right varieties. So different varieties like different things, and you can grow them in different ways. You can make it work, but you've got to have a plan. So guys, I'm conscious that I'm talking and talking. Feel free if you had enough and you want to move on, that's absolutely fine. I'm very happy to stay around here and continue talking.
Are we going to do a vote? What are your top 3 favourites?
My top 3?
Yeah.
Of what?
These.
These 3?
Yeah.
It's biased. Number 2.
I have to say I think this is good.
Sorry?
This last one is very good.
Yeah, it's my favourite.
But it should be.
Yeah.
The 35 pounds bottle.
Yeah.
I'd be very happy to have this in my cellar and put it out for a special occasion. I would. I'd quite like to see that. I'd probably go down in order.
Yeah.
I'll go 4, 3, 2, 1. But
Yeah.
sorry. We're on the 4. That's the 4th.
That's his favourite. 4, 3, 2, 1.
So that's Worcester's 2020. So this is very much a champagne blend. So it's Pinot Noir. So it's a bit more austere, a bit more champagne. So I personally, I don't like champagne very much. I find champagne a little bit. The beauty is we all like different things. Otherwise, we don't have I know why you don't want food.
Sorry, Jim.
Ready for Chris?
I prefer the last one, but like he says, I think you pay for what you get, really.
So that's a good
I think that is the last one.
That is the best.
Yeah,
But value for money.
£35.
I was told when I cleaned them, when they overproduce, they tell them to add
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's only
It's
as a
not all
big
about. Right, I've got you.
They
Yeah.
can't tell it's nice timber because they don't put it down and grade it.
Yeah.
So that's what we were told.
Wow, yeah.
I think history twice one.
So, so the message there is you can't always base it on cost, can you? But, yeah. Yeah. But that's the retailers for you, isn't it? I mean, I work in the food industry and the retailers, they can monopolise it on the costs. Yeah. It is, yeah. He's passionate as well. He knows his stuff, doesn't he?
This one, the price, but price
Yeah.
was good value. Was that a champagne?
Yeah. I preferred that one for 2. I mean the rosé one's a bit different. It's something on its own. It's different, but definitely for 2.
If you're buying a sparkling wine substitute for champagne, I mean that's the best.
Yeah.
Then price-wise,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean you're
Yeah.
getting absolutely reasonable
Yeah.
champagne, aren't you? About that. Quite interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, doubt it where we live.
You like
Well, we live in Cheshire. Yeah. Jenna's from Chester. Brilliant. Well, it's funny because we stayed in Eccleston in Easter.
Oh, I did say it's
No, we stayed at an Airbnb in Eccleston tonight. It was right next to the Bell.
There's quite posh place there.
Yeah.
the guy that used to be that one
Chef of the year.
Yeah.
He's not there anymore.
Oh wow.
Very good.
Yeah.
He goes the bell for me.
Well, we're right next to the Bell. We've not been in yet, but when we came in first time I've been to the Cotwold, and it's absolutely wonderful, lovely, you know. It's quite vast, isn't it? It goes quite, not so much north to south, but east to west, it goes quite across.
The green here is a rock out the Cotwold sky. It's been ranked Broadway to here, when the ice so it's a mini Cotwold.
Yeah.
So we'll take that as far.
Parts of the a bit further east.
Yeah, east. whereas this is west. This is the Cotswold, isn't it? Are we officially in the Cotswold?
That's the Rolling Hill thing.
Yes, yeah. It's lovely.
Well, it's part geologically.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're in the middle of bay.
Yeah. If you go this way, there's some still lovely quaint villages here. Yeah, it's lovely. It's lovely. Even though it's not the Cotswold, it is. Because it's still quaint, it's still lovely.
Walkway's only 7 miles.
But it's probably better being here than in the Cotswold because it's swarming with tourists, isn't it? Yeah. It's a lovely spot, this. I mean, look at it. Did you watch the Clarkson?
Yeah.
Have you watched him?
Yeah.
He's
Bit of a character.
he is a character. He knows what he's doing, doesn't he? I mean, I watch it and I'm always annoyed. But I think he wants you to be annoyed. That's how he grabs you. You know, so it's just all a big show, isn't it? You know. But you know, he's done a good thing, I suppose, for the economy. Well, we came here in April for Easter for a week. Jenna and her family we hired a cottage in Eckington, and it was lovely. No, it was on the other side of the railway.
It's my mate. He features that farm, and they've got a farm.
Yes.
But they're just very nice.
Yeah. But it's into Eckington, but the other side. Yeah. Yeah. And it's a nice little spot. It's not air. Oh right, yeah. It's a lovely spot. Well, must be because we've come back again. Twice. Yeah. But it's nice, you know.
Well, the big do, you know, the last but Privilege was the first, 50 years ago, they did it. So there's a tribute band to Queen playing in the village.
Oh wow.
Okay, and tickets. Tomorrow, if you're around, at 12,
Yeah.
celebrating Queen Elizabeth the first visit in 450 years ago. So look at it.
Wow. Oh, brilliant.
What's worse?
Yeah.
There's a Queen tribute tonight.
Yeah, that sounds really good. Yeah.
Anyway, you've got probably better.
Well, I don't know what we're doing actually. Just going with the flow, I think.
Yeah. Well, the bell's quite nice. I go for a drink in the Bredan pub every sort of 5th Friday. They sell Dominicans ale.
Yeah.
Turn left and you go round Kemerton, Overbridge, Comberton, Ashton-on-the-Hill. It's 20 miles down the bottom of this hill.
Yeah.
And there's probably no finish.
That sounds good.
The bell's probably quite good.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think we're having anything to eat tonight. We've got some takeover from what we had last night. So yeah. What time does it finish here? No.
We won the ticket.
Yeah.
So we thought, well, let's splash out company and spend a bit of money buying food.
Yeah.
They might not get their money back. Tickets they donated to the village bank.
Yeah. Well, it's good to put some money back into the community, isn't it?
Well,
Yeah. It's lovely, isn't it? Well, we came here in April, and Hugo, he gave us a little bit of a tour around. Yeah, so basically we emailed in April, so I just wanted to bring Jenna and the family here just to sort of give a bit of a tour. And he said basically Hugo just works for them. I don't. And, yeah, so basically, yeah, we went to the tour and so this there was on and Jenna and I loved it. So
they bring the grapes to us.
Twice, yeah.
Yeah, so Deer Park, I mean, people have been saying today that Deer Park's backers is quite awesome. Yeah, they've been a limestone, it's similar to Worcestershire probably, but we're on much sandy lines, so you get very different characteristics, and therefore our backers is different to their backers. So,
This one of yours is really enjoyable.
Yeah, considering it's half the price. Yeah. Well, you know, that's £22, is it?
For 3 years.
Showing the
I think our challenge now is there's quite a lot of new vineyards around.
Yeah.
So when people want to go and see something new, so we're getting people to come and see Three Choirs. A lot of people say, oh, yeah, well, I know Three Choirs, I've been to Three Choirs.
It's been around a long time. Three Choirs, do they supply to any of the retailers, or do they provide them to the Wine Society?
Wine Society.
Because I've been a member of the Wine Society for about, must be 20 years.
So the Society English White
Yes.
is made by Three Choirs.
Right.
So the Three Choirs line comes down.
their label.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So their Society White is our wine.
But I recognise your label and your brand.
It's not. We've just got a rosé in with them now,
Yes.
which is a Pinot Noir rosé, which they've done under our label.
Yes.
But they're still white.
Yeah.
It's for us.
I've been a big fan of the Wine Society. I mean,
I
if you
think
look,
they're brilliant.
if you look at their wine don't say the same, but I mean, it's probably because they're new in the game. You've been around for quite a while.
Yeah.
But I mean, I subscribe to which, and then when they compare the wine clubs,
Yeah.
like the Wine Society is up there, way above the rest of
The
them.
Wine Society, yeah. I mean, the value for money that they get, I know because
Yeah.
what they sell our wine for. They sell our wine way cheaper than I want them to,
Yeah.
because it puts so much pressure on us in other places.
So in one sense they're not good, but in another sense, yeah, because you're almost
So
like a retailer in a way, aren't you?
They
They put
don't
pressure
retail.
on.
They are buying on behalf of their members.
Yes, yeah,
They
yeah.
buy a goodly amount, so
Yeah.
they justify getting a trade price,
Yeah.
and then they don't put the margin on for you.
Yeah.
So you can buy a wine at the Wine Society for around 10 quid from us,
Yeah.
which would be on our shelves at 12,
Yeah.
and they're delivering it to your door.
So that's good for you. It's not good for you.
Well,
Yeah.
it's good for us because we're selling them, they
Yeah.
make a lot of wine for us, but it's very important for us that it's under their own society label, so it's a completely different wine. We can't sell
Oh,
it,
so it's not affecting the so people aren't looking at the cost.
they can't say, oh, this wine is
Yes.
cheaper than that.
Yes.
But you're getting a much better value,
Yeah.
you're getting very good value from the Wine Society for the wine that they buy from us.
Right.
At 10 quid.
So I'll stick with the Wine Society, doing a good job.
I'm not a very good salesman, am I? They don't stock our sparkling, so you'll have to come to us for that.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Can you
you.
buy the free pies from any of the retailers?
We're in Majestic
Yeah.
with a wine called Stone, and we're in Waitrose.
Yeah, that's it. Waitrose. That's where I've seen it. That's where I've seen the actual brand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
That was really insightful, and thanks for your honesty. Yeah. Who are the top three British English wines brands? Because Chapel Down has been a big one.
Biggest, you'd say Chapel Down. Chapel Down are up there.
Sorry? No, that's French, isn't it? Angel.
Oh, they're Whispering Angels.
Whispering Angels.
That's French.
French. Yeah.
But the
So Chapel Down, and then who?
Chapel Down. Who else is big? Balfour. They're
Yeah.
quite big in the supermarkets now.
Yeah.
Night Timber are big in acreage, but they're very high end, and they're very champagne house style. They didn't used to call it that in English. They used to call it night timber and they didn't mention England. But now because everybody else is doing quite a good job as well, they call it England.
So what are your thoughts on the orange one? I've got to try it. I feel like I'm reading a lot of articles on orange.
Yeah, we've got our amber on the stand here. You come over and try it.
Yeah, we already like the giant pet. I mean, it's so good. But at the same time, I don't want to. I don't mind paying £20 for a bottle, but I don't think I'm going to like it.
No.
So, you know,
It's innovative, isn't it? So the orange one is through the skin,
right.
isn't it?
Yeah, so it's like making white wine in a red wine.
Yeah.
In a red wine way.
Yeah.
So it's fermented on skins. Thank you. And then it's aged in an oak barrel, put into bottle and left to age a bit. So there's a 22 vintage on our stand. If you want to go and try that, that's required. Yeah. Well, I like it.
Yeah.
It's a Marmite wine, isn't it? People will find it very interesting.
some people love it or hate it, and everyone else
And it's finding the time. The challenge I have is when will you drink it? It's all very well trying to say, well, this is very interesting. When would you buy a bottle to drink when? And that's the thing. I think it could go quite well with cheese. If you don't want a summer Sunday roast, you can have, instead of having a red wine with you can have something like that. But, so there's ways of thinking about it, but it's not something that comes naturally
But I think
to mind.
it will. I think it's getting more, because I'm seeing a lot more articles.
Yeah,
It's
there
getting
are,
more
and I think. But when we did it, we tasted a load of wines from Henley-In-Arden. We tried a load of wines from around the world. We thought we could do better.
Yeah.
So we tried.
I prefer the old world wine. I know you won't say English wine is old world because it's completely new, isn't it? But because it yields a lower alcohol volume, doesn't it? So the new world is like really strong, isn't it?
Well, the new world
down to the fruit and
so the climate and the varieties and they were producing very high sugared wines. Outside of Europe was all of the wine was produced in Europe, especially France. So they had legislation around that protected them and stopped anybody else doing it. Then the Australians suddenly came along and said, here you are, here's a Cabernet Sauvignon. Then the Australians, the Californians came along and said, here you are, here's a Shiraz. And they didn't have any legislation that stopped them from experimenting and doing different things.
is that why they changed the name? So like Shiraz is Syrah, isn't it?
Yeah, so Syrah is so
is there a reason behind why they changed the name of it? Is that down to
I don't know.
No.
Really. I think maybe there's slightly different clones, or they've
because they immigrated, didn't they, basically, and then took
took them out with them. But they've been able to experiment with things. So one of the things that they do in Australia and California is that they get the grapes absolutely as ripe as they possibly can. So much sugar and no acid. And then they de-alkalize it. They ferment it, and then they take some of the alcohol out. So they produce a wine at about 18% alcohol. The yeast will go up higher than they used to. And then they'll put it through a machine to take out 6% alcohol and give you a 12% wine that tastes like jam. So they tend to be really, really fruity and absolutely full. And that's
overboard,
So they're actually letting the grapes, rather than picking the grapes when they're bad and optimum grapes, they're letting them go through to what they call physiological ripeness.
and then de-alkalizing.
And then
Not de-alkalizing.
de-alkalizing.
Oh, they are de-alkalizing.
Yeah, they take it out and use it in the first process. So but you see, we're not, and that process was banned in Europe. So the Europeans then couldn't compete with what the Australians were doing. So you've ended up with New World wines being quite different to Old World wines. But now it's sort of starting to change a bit.
But I've sort of gravitated back to Old World. I used to like the New World when I was younger, but like now it's like...
I'm the same. I remember going to a tasting in London, and there was a very, very French sommelier that was doing this Sauvignon Blanc tasting. And we tasted loads of Sauvignon Blancs from Chile and New Zealand, and they were all really in your face. Lovely. You know, glasses, perfect. And I said, but what food would you put with that? And in France, they drink wine with food. And so they make Sauvignon Blanc in a slightly more subtle way to actually complement food. And I think as we get older, I think
and that's down to culture, isn't it? So the French, I mean, I've just been away to France at work, and like we drink wine in the day. Like even when you're working, it's like for the British culture that's something unheard of, but it's ingrained in them to it's not about the alcohol percentage, it's about enjoying it with food.
Yeah.
And I don't think we understand what good food is in this country, even now, you know what I mean? It's all about convenience food, and we don't understand the pairing side of it as well, because it's not part of our culture, is it?
No.
But I think as we get older, I think we realise that.
Yeah, but I'd say that food pairing is something we don't do a lot of it at Vineyard. Because we like people to eat what they like and drink what they like.
Yeah.
If it works for them, who are we to say it's wrong?
Yeah.
On the other hand, there's people that ask all the time and say, well, what would you do? What would you have this week? I said, well, so it's like with the orange wine, well, what would I have with it? I'd probably try it with cheese. To be honest.
Yeah, like a good
But,
English hard cheese as well. 'Cause it just,
the trouble with your wine is the more you learn, the more there is to know.
and more there is to drink. That's the good point. Right. Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you.